one of the things I do miss is LAN parties, and that was when I know I was literally the only female in the room. Usually it was by day it was like the local gym or maybe where the church would have their coffee, they have their dinner parties or stuff like that. So these boring rooms, and then you could see that fathers would drop off their sons. They were like 15, 16, 17 years old. You could smell the testosterone from blocks away, and they would have these computers with them. They had been modifying them, modding them. And the screens were modded, and they had backlight, stuff like that. It was just really cool. And then basically they would just game it the same way as you can see gamers on Twitch. You never game alone. So that's another cliche that has to go.
Has to be eradicated.
You never game alone. And these LAN parties were where you could team up with others. And I remember they would just sleep wherever. And the morning after, when I came back, I was a media sponsor. I was running a rather big chat website back then called chat.be. We were a media sponsor. And I came back the next morning, and that smell of, testosterone, heavy sweat, like old tennis socks, stale pizza and cardboard.
Red Bull.
That's the smell that you'll never forget. And basically what they were doing, there was this big server in the middle, was exchanging music, MP3 files, porn videos, lots of those, and movies. And there were a lot of people who came into contact with a particular subculture, like, I don't know, rap music or anything, thanks to these LAN parties.
Yes.
I mean, this would just open your mind that there was all sorts of other stuff going on as well. But those were very, very intense days, and they were like the high point in a lot of people's lives.
But Chloe, how does it feel to have been so incredibly ahead of your time? You were surely one of the only girls that was participating in LAN parties at that time. Right now in 2020, girls are into gaming. It's normal. They've caught up. Yeah. But back then, do you ever stop and think about that? And I can also imagine that maybe back then people used to make fun of you for that, or your environment, or your parents would be like, "Why are you always going to these LAN parties with all these guys? Like, why can't you play with the other girls?" Or that didn't happen?
I was always a weird kid, and I still am basically weird. And when I try to be an example for other people, is just fly your freak flag, as long as you don't hurt other people. I'm crazy but harmless, basically. But I was sent to a very strict Catholic school. I think they still remember my name after all these years, because I just hated every minute I was there. It was an elite girls' school, and I definitely didn't belong there.
Girls only.
Girls only, and it was as if, and it was as if, to me, it appeared as a breeding ground for future doctors' wives.
Right.
If you were ambitious, you could become, I don't know, a pharmacist or something like that.
Trophy wives, yeah.
Yeah. That's what it felt like to me. I'm sure it was definitely. And then the nuns are the most. They are so frustrated in so many ways. They should have never been allowed in the educational system because they're so toxic and bitter, and I drove them nuts. But so since this was an elite school, they would win every local competition.
Right.
And they had won 4 computers. I'm talking like 1987, something like that. So they won 4 computers. And they decided to exchange the 4 computers for one, it was an IBM 286, the fastest machine you could get, with a matrix printer attached to it. And this was...
what is a matrix printer?
Yeah.
Because
well,
you gotta go easy on me. Like,
yeah. You had daisy wheel printers, for example, but it was basically a printer that went like dick, and you had to wait until the paper came out. Very often the paper was like one big chain of paper with little holes on the side, so it could be pulled. Anyway, I didn't like having my lunch with 500 other girls that were very noisy. I have a hearing impairment that can be fixed, and to me it was like whoa. So I heard about this computer, and then I talked my way into that room every day at noon.
How'd you do that? I would love to hear.
I can be very convincing, and it was just sitting there. No one was using it, and I was publishing the school magazine all on my own, and I could use it as a typewriter and print it, and then that's how it started. And then when I arrived at university, which was to me a lifesaver, was full of people like me. I was in Antwerp. I mean, wow.
Which studies?
Linguistics.
Linguistics?
Yes.
How does that make sense?
Well, there was no applied...
yeah.
I mean, you had like Lernout and Houseby, which was... you had a little bit of the equivalent of Silicon Valley in Belgium in the 90s.
Can you just briefly, for the people who are not aware what Lernout and Houseby is, because it's very interesting.
It's like the biggest internet bubble we've ever had.
Yeah.
So the technology was speech-to-text technology, and they were based somewhere, let me think. I know you had a language valley somewhere in one part of Flanders, and then you had a multimedia valley in Hasselt, and neither of these two places had people who were trained to be programmers. So the next big thing were linguists, because basically if you learn what makes up a language like English or Dutch, grammar is the same as code. Grammar defines how words behave, and code defines how commands behave and how it should handle data. So basically it's the same skill set. So I arrived at university, and I had this amazing technology where you could be in the library of Antwerp University, and in real time you could look up whether a book was available in the Leuven University. And there's a network called BNix, B-N-I-X, which was the precursor of internet, really, as far as the Benelux is concerned. And I just fell in love immediately, and I kept looking for excuses to get my hands on computers. There's always, you can always find someone or some way to get your hands on a keyboard and go online. And someone is old when they can still make the sound that your router would make, your modem. You needed a modem, and it would just talk to the server to try and get online. And at first, the internet was really slow, 28.8K, which is nothing. How do you know an internet person is really old? Is when you ask them, can you make the sound of a 28.8K modem? And they go, yeah, I can. It's called And you could buy magazines like Network Magazine, and they would have CD-ROMs packaged with the magazine.
That was a big deal in the beginning, right?
It was a pretty big deal, because the CD-ROMs contained would now be illegal software,
right?
Which you could just play around with, all sorts of software, lots of games, word processors. You could it was one big play garden. There was a physical magazine, a printed magazine that had the URL of every website in Belgium in it. And it got bigger and bigger every year until they gave up. For me, it was... when I was little, I would just go to the library, and you were only allowed 6 books, and I would just, take them home, read all 6 of them, and then get back before the library closed and get 6 more. And now all of a sudden there was this information highway, and you could look up everything. This optimism you only find in Wikipedia, right? And people were cobbling together their own websites with animated GIFs. Animated GIFs, they're still around. They're just wonderful. You would have a website, and then you would have an animated GIF of someone, you know, a little man with a shovel, and this meant please check back often for updates.
Yeah.
And you had another one with, you know, with a letterbox. And you could click on it and you could send someone an email. For me, there was like amazing. You could be a freak in a super niche, and there would still be a similar freak in the same super niche somewhere on the other side of the planet. You could order a T-shirt from Australia. The first time I did that, I was like, this is wow. 2 weeks later, that actually landed on my doorstep. So I fell in love with the whole thing. I never look back.
Do you need help making better decisions in your life? Are you lacking self-confidence and motivation to get things done? Hire me today and get a direct daily line of communication with me through video chat and audio messages. I operate on a week-to-week basis, so no long-term investment is required. 7 straight days of Viking advice will get you right on track. Email me at lorenz.dries@gmail.com and change your reality. I'm ready whenever you are. See you soon.